Provost of our university, Dr. Russ Newman, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Don. I want to formally welcome those of you who are from Alliant to the colloquium, and especially those of you who might not be from Alliant. Welcome to the colloquium, and welcome to our panelists and our keynote speaker, who I'll introduce in a minute. But first, I really want to thank Dawn for the work she's done in developing this colloquium on behalf of CSPP and the educational objectives of CSPP, and also Sheila Henderson from iMerit. The combination of CSPP and the iMerit office have really partnered to put this colloquium into place. Those of you who are from Alliant, I hope know this. Those of you who aren't may not, that this university is really committed to training professionals to be able to do high-quality professional practice in the real world and work on contemporary significant problems, to solve those problems in the diverse communities in which they live and work. That one little word, diverse communities, is misleading in how much really the breadth it represents. And around here, I think we know it isn't singular. It's not just diversity as a singular concept. It's really comprised of a whole host of components and issues and ideas and important values. From a diversity standpoint, we talk about ethnicity and racial diversity and cultural diversity and gender diversity and sexual orientation diversity. And one component of the diversity that is just as important as the others that we don't always as much get into the educational mix is related to spiritual and religious diversity. And that really is the focus of our colloquium today. And really a wonderful opportunity consistent with the mission here at Alliant in training our professional practitioners to think about different ideas, to learn about them. I think we've got a wonderful panel who you will hear introduced later on. But we really also have a wonderful keynote speaker who it's my honor to be able to introduce. And in order to do justice to it, I need to put my reading glasses on. Reverend Ed Bacon, who is our keynote speaker today, is the rector of All Saints Church in Pasadena, California, a 4,000-member, multi-ethnic urban Episcopal parish with a reputation for energetic worship, a radically inclusive spirit, and a progressive peace and justice agenda. Reverend Bacon's energies focus on leadership in anxious times, peacemaking, interfaith relations, integrating family, faith and work systems, and articulating the Christian faith in non-bigoted ways. He's a passionate advocate for peace and justice in the community, the nation, and the world. He has received several honors for his peace and interfaith work. He is a founder of Beyond Inclusion and Claiming the Blessing, which works for justice for the LGBT community, and a co-founder of the Abrahamic Faith Peacemaking Initiative. He serves on Human Rights Watch California Committee South and on other national and community boards. Ed has been a guest on Oprah's Soul series on XM's Oprah and Friends Radio, as well as the Oprah Winfrey Show, the true test of his real greatness, which led to a role as guest host twice a month on Oprah's Soul series and contributor on Oprah.com. His first book, 8 Habits of Love, Open Your Heart, Open Your Mind, will be published by Grand Central Publishing Company in September 2012. Prior to coming to All Saints, Reverend Bacon served as Dean of the Cathedral of St. Andrew in Jackson, Mississippi, Rector of St. Mark's in Dalton, Georgia, and Dean of Students in Campus Ministry at Mercer University in Macon, Georgia. He holds honorary degrees honorary doctorates awarded by Church Divinity School of the Pacific and Mercer University. He and his wife, Hope Hendricks Bacon, have 2 adult children and 2 grandchildren. Please join with me in welcoming Reverend Bacon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Pardon me, I have a new device here, and I'm supposed to turn it on and record myself. It's really great to be here. I'm very honored to be invited to this, and I feel like I'm on a journey of discovery with you this afternoon. I'm hoping to be able to kind of talk for a few minutes and then hopefully have some questions and answers, because my experience is that that's where the juice always is in that kind of collaboration. I think that I understand my task this afternoon, and that is to talk about how we can hold our own value systems in a nourishing way, a way that nourishes us, and at the same time be a resource to people who are very different from us, have different value systems, see God differently, however you want to put that. Now let me see, yeah, it seems to be working. All of us are post 9/11 people. And by that I mean, for those of us who are religious or spiritual or who have a value system, that we are called to be interreligious or to participate in communities where there are people of different values and have a different path. I have been using that as a mantra since 9/11. I'm very happy to be in an interfaith community in Los Angeles of Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Baha'is, and atheists. And after 9/11, we kind of gathered quickly at a mosque at the University of Southern California, and an imam spoke and said that mantra: to be religious in the 21st century is to be interreligious. And that registered deeply for me and continues to bear fruit in terms of my understanding what that might mean. That's where I want to wind up, kind of arguing what that means. But in order to do that, I want to start and tell you a story about myself. I grew up in a small hamlet in South Georgia to a Southern Baptist father, preacher father. And he also was an educator. He was a junior high school principal, and later the superintendent of public schools. I was given a very strong story or narrative about how the world works. I blissfully went through childhood, high school, went to college, and at nearing the end of my college journey, had no idea what I was supposed to do. Many people told me that I should be a minister, but I absolutely was never going to be a minister because my father was a minister. And his way of doing ministry was not me. And so I said, come on, tell me what I really should do. And everyone said, you look like a lawyer, you talk like a lawyer, walk like a lawyer, dress like a lawyer, you should go to law school. So I went to Vanderbilt University Law School, and midway through, the United States bombed Cambodia during the Vietnam War, and I found myself at a peace rally where this speaker made a very powerful and compelling argument about solidarity, that those of us who were protected from being in that war should know how we would deal with that war if we were not in a protected status. I really knew that that person was telling the truth because I had a draft number of number 4. And I knew that I would be on the battlefield if I were not in this protected status of being in law school. So I went to this person's office and said, you've got me. Give me a reading list. I need to figure out where I actually stand on this war. And so he threw at me across his desk a bibliography, and I picked it up, and I was chosen by a book title. The book was Faith and Violence by Thomas Merton. And I began to read. Thomas Merton was a Trappist monk, Roman Catholic monk, the greatest probably spiritual teacher in the 20th century in Roman Catholicism. And I read that and began to read that more than I was reading my law texts. And the essence of what Merton was saying was that in every human being, when we are created, God places a word in each one of us that God does not put in anybody else. And we cannot manufacture this word. The only thing we can do is discover it. And when we discover our unique, differentiated word, then we have discovered salvation. I continued to study law and read Thomas Merton. After that first book, I read another book, another book, another book. It came time in the third semester of law school for me to take a final exam. And this particular exam was in the Uniform Commercial Code, which is the most boring area of the law you can imagine. It is a great thing for insomniacs to read at night. But I had it nailed. And we came into the testing situation, and in those days, we took tests in blue books. We wrote them out. We didn't take computers into the exam room, and we always had to sign an honor pledge, meaning that we didn't copy from somebody else. But this professor said, the honor pledge on this exam is for you to promise to me that you're not going to start writing your exam answer until the third of the 4 hours you're in this room. You have to spend the first 2 hours outlining your answer. I did that, being a good student. After 2 hours, I took a walk outside. It was a January morning. The snow was lightly falling. And I promise you, I heard this inaudible voice ask, "Are you an attorney?" And I responded, "No." And that inaudible voice asked the second question, "If you're not an attorney, do you need a law degree?" And I answered no. And the third question was, "If you don't need a law degree, do you need to finish this final exam?" I said no. And I kept walking. Now I could tell you many things about that time in my life, what that meant to the woman with whom I was about to marry. She and I just celebrated 45 years together. To my parents who had paid for me to go to law school. The most important thing I want you to remember from that story, as I tell a couple of other stories, is that my true self, the word God implanted in me, was participating in that conversation with the power, the spirit, the energy, the force in life I call God. You may call something else. 2 weeks ago, Robert Gupta was speaking at my church. Robert's 24 years old. At age 19, he auditioned for and was given a seat in the Los Angeles Philharmonic as a violinist. Played his first concert at age 11 in Israel with Zubin Mehta conducting. He'd been playing violin since he was 4. His parents are Orthodox Hindu, came to this country so that he could, and his brother, who's a pianist, could get musical training. Robert is featured in a book and a movie called The Soloist, written by Steve Lopez about a man named Nathaniel Ayers, who lives on the streets of Los Angeles. Brilliant man, diagnosed schizophrenic, went to Juilliard to study as a double bassist, and one day left. And no one knew where he was, including his family, until one day Steve Lopez, a journalist of the LA Times, was simply walking in downtown LA and began to hear some of the most beautiful music he'd ever heard. And he looked, and there was Nathaniel Ayers playing a violin with only 2 strings, making beautiful music next to his sleeping role under a bridge in downtown LA. Long story short, Steve struck up a relationship with him, a friendship, began writing about him in his column in the LA Times, wrote this book, The Soloist. It was turned into a movie. And in the course of that journey, he took Mr. Nathaniel Ayers to the Disney Music Hall just to be around musicians, thinking that something might click. And something did click between Nathaniel Ayers, who prefers to be called Mr. Ayers, and Robert Gupta, then a 19-year-old violinist. And so they began playing the violin together, and Steve Lopez got a couple of instruments for Mr. Ayers. One day, they were playing, and Robert Gupta mentioned Steve Lopez, and Mr. Ayers was triggered and went into an uncontrollable rant. And Robert Gupta was scared for what this might happen, what this might mean for Mr. Ayers. And the only thing he needed to do was pick up his violin and begin to play every violin concerto he knew. After he had played 6 or 7 concerti, Mr. Ayers picked up a violin. Remember, he was trained as a double bassist at Juilliard, not a violinist. He picked up a violin and began to play Sibelius's concerto. When Robert told us the story at All Saints, he said, imagine forgetting your beauty, your humanity. This music gave hope by restoring that memory to Mr. Ayers. Story number 3. I read it from my own forthcoming book. I take it from a fantastic book by one of the walking saints of our world today, Father Gregory Boyle from East LA, Jesuit priest. The name of the book is Tattoos on the Heart. It's a story about compassion. And here's my favorite story. Father Greg met a former gang member named Miguel. As a young boy, Miguel had been mistreated, abused, and finally completely abandoned by his family, and he turned to a gang to fill the void his loved ones had left behind. Young Miguel took a violent journey through Los Angeles gang life, was convicted of multiple crimes, and sent away to prison before he was even 20 years old. After he was released, Father Greg put into work in a graffiti removal project of Homeboy Industries, which has as its tagline, "Nothing stops a bullet like a job." One New Year's Day, Father Greg's telephone rang. He's known as G by the homies. "Happy New Year, G," said a voice in a strong Latino accent. It was Miguel. "You know, Miguel, it's strange. I was thinking of you on Christmas Day." He knew that Miguel had no family to welcome him in and had wondered where he had spent Christmas and what he was doing to celebrate had Miguel been alone that day. "Oh no," Miguel answered quickly. "I invited homies from the crew, you know, vatos, like me, who had no place to go for Christmas." He named the 5 young men who had come over to spend the day with him in his tiny apartment on Christmas. Father Greg was absolutely incredulous because he knew each one of those men. They had all been enemies from rival gangs. He asked Miguel what he did on Christmas Day with these former enemies. Well, Miguel said, "You're not going to believe this, but I cooked a turkey." His voice swelled with pride. He said he prepared it ghetto style. Greg laughed and told him that he was not really familiar with that recipe. You just rub it with a gang of butter, throw a bunch of salt and pepper on it, squeeze a couple of limones over it, and put it in the oven. It tasted proper. It must have been quite a scene in that spare apartment in the barrio, as Father Greg writes in his book. One would be hard-pressed to imagine something more sacred and ordinary than these 6 orphans sitting at an oven together. It is the entire law and prophets all in one moment, right there in this humble, holy kitchen. Here was a young man who had been orphaned, beaten, abused, and yet had learned to be resilient and magnanimous, the kind of person who gathers enemies together for a meal in his own home. The compassion extended to him by Father Greg allowed the beloved, which is my way of referring to God, in Miguel to blossom once again, as it had when he was still an innocent child, open to receiving the love in the world. Compassion, as practiced by Father Greg and his co-workers, is the act of seeing beneath the surface of behavior, regardless of what level of offense we may feel has been committed. From the most deeply etched occasions of pain to the relatively trivial, we are all constantly being offered a choice of whether or not we will demonize someone who appears as our adversary. It may be the boss at work who is relentlessly backstabbing, the teacher who seems to have it in for us, the parent who cannot stop criticizing or judging us, or perhaps it is someone who has done us or our family unimaginable harm. Later, working side by side in the homeboy warehouse, Greg turned to Miguel and asked how he did it, given all the pain he had suffered. Miguel had his answer ready. "You know, G, I always suspected that there was something of goodness in me, but I just couldn't find it. Until one day," he quieted a bit, "one day I discovered it here in my heart. I found it. Goodness. And ever since that day, I have always known who I was." He paused and then, looking Greg in the eye, said, "And now, nothing can touch me." One of the reasons I said yes to this gracious invitation to come and be with you is that I love therapists. Because my psychiatrist, over the course of 8 years of therapy when I was in my 30s, 30 years ago, when I was clinically depressed, taught me that there was beauty in me, there was goodness in me, that at my core was a word, a truth that God had placed in me that God didn't place in anybody else. And to the degree that I would spend my life comparing myself or contrasting myself to anybody else, I would deprive my life of its fullness and meaning and flourishing. Comparison is the thief of joy. I was touched by a comment made about the men who, when Muammar Gaddafi was captured, they killed him, which I thought was a tragedy. And the commentator said, they were so angry they could not access their moral self. You and I and every other human being have a moral self in us. We have something of goodness in us. We have something that is incomparably beautiful. And so I asked Professor Griffin if she would supply you with a poem that I leave you with. It's in your handout. It's in green, and it happens to be one of the most important poems I think that's been written. It's by Galway Kinnell. The name of it is St. Francis and the Sow. And I leave it to you to put in your book of poems. I encourage you to keep a book of quotations and poems. I won't read the entire thing because I want to have some questions and answers, but I really love in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th line where it says, the poet says, sometimes it is necessary to reteach a thing its loveliness, to put a hand on its brow of the flower and retell it in words and in touch. It is lovely until it flowers again from within of self-blessing. You and I, who are providers of help and health and care, I think, have this as our role. No matter how different someone else is, and no matter how differently they believe from our beliefs, whether they call God Allah or God or Yahweh or I don't believe in God, our job is to bracket all that and simply do everything in our power to do what my psychiatrist for 8 years did for me. And that is to teach each person, to reintroduce to each person the goodness, the godness, the divinity, the light that was put in us at creation. I rather began with Thomas Merton. I end with him. On the flip side of that poem is Thomas Merton's lyrical description of this dynamic that is pulsing, this fountain that is flowing inside you and me and every other person on the planet. God loves you, is present in you, lives in you, dwells in you, calls you, saves you, and offers you an understanding and light which are like nothing you ever found in books or heard in sermons. There is in the depths of your own heart the intimate union of God's Spirit and your own inmost spirit, so that you and God are in all truth one spirit. And in another place he says, there is a point in every human being that no matter how much they've been abused, has never been touched, because it is a divinely placed and divinely protected place. And it is God. And when you and I can access that in ourselves, and even better, when you and I can help someone else discover and access that in themselves, we are in business and we can bring peace to this world and transform the human race into the human family. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. It would be a bonus to me if we could take 5 minutes of questions and answers. Is that okay? Challenges, questions, please.
You made specific reference of resilience at one point, but frankly, I think a lot of what you said implied issue of resilience. Can you say something about your perspective on religion and spirituality and its role in being resilient, building resilience, protecting resilience?
Yeah. I think that Resilience is one of the fruits that is born in a person's being on a journey of being led by religious or spiritual truth. And I put it that way instead of our possessing truth. If anybody tells me they possess the truth, I run. And then I turn around and come back and try to love. I mentioned that all of us kind of are born into the world with a certain narrative, a story, and it has philosophical and spiritual and religious facets to it. And I think it behooves every person who's interested in maturity and in service to continually ask questions that are self-critical about the narrative you've been given, and to ask to what degree is it toxic, i.e. death-promoting, and to what degree is it generative, i.e. life-giving, and to have the courage constantly on your journey to be able to slough off the parts of your own narrative that you've inherited, the parts that are toxic, and embrace something that's deeper and more life-giving, that's generative. And my experience is both as a person on that journey, I pray to be on that journey, and as a person who works with people who are trying to be on that journey, that to the degree we are constantly growing and sloughing off what Jesus called the wheat from the chaff from the wheat, the transient from the eternal, that gives us resilience, and it gives us compassion and acceptance of other people, and it gives us a lot of courage. Is that responsive? Any other? Yeah, please.
I was kind of interested in the fact, something that you mentioned, that during the 30s you had a period of depression, and I assume that this was after you had basically found religion as being your major vocation. Normally it's said that people who are really religious do not enter into that kind of situation, partly because they rely on God, and they feel that whatever difficulty, etc., if that is the source of your depression, is from God, and so they rely on God to basically fix that rather than going to a therapist.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I think God uses therapists, and God uses depression. And for me, I had been religious all my life, and this period of clinical depression came in when I was doing that job of leaving a restrictive, constrictive, suffocating, punitive religious system behind, and was trying to step into a new, more life-giving system. And my depression came from the fact that I had very little support for leaving that behind, particularly from my parents, because it represented all that they had given me, and to venture into something that was more life-giving. So I think that, I'm the pastor of a church where a lot of people come to us to become members in their adult years. And oftentimes, they have not been without some kind of theological, religious rearing, but it has become too small for them. And so they're going into something that's more life-giving and life-embracing, and they're getting a lot of hell from their parents or from their system about leaving that behind. And that causes great stress. And to say that you should only rely on God would mean that you wouldn't seek out another human being who could be God for you, or could represent God for you. So I think that God works through kinds of people. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, very much for having me and having this panel. It's a really a wonderful opportunity. The thing that's not in my bio that is most important to this conversation is that this morning I called my father, who's a clinical psychologist in private practice, and I said, "So, Dad, I'm on this panel, and I know it's short notice, but maybe you could tell me what I should say." That's the first lesson you should know about the Jewish community. But in seriousness, I mean, I called him not just because he's a tremendous, not just because he's my father and I love him, but because as a therapist he works a lot within the Jewish community, very oftentimes because therapists, or families I should say, come to him because he is Jewish and they have issues in their family or with their child in a Jewish day school setting, and they want to be with someone who speaks their language. That's not to say he hasn't, counseled and worked with many other families in different faith traditions. But the first thing I want to say that I think is not unique to the Jewish community, but I think is unique to any faith community or any person who finds their faith to be of importance to them, is that they want to work with someone if they find themselves in a situation of wanting to see or needing to see some kind of healthcare professional, mental health care professional. They want to be understood. They want to be listened to. They want to understand. They want to know that you see them in all of their wholeness and all of their complexity, including, right, their faith and their perhaps their difficulties with faith as much as their faith themselves. There's so much to say for each one of us, I'm sure, about what our faith community offers us. But I want to say a few things about the strengths first that I think can also be understood sometimes as the challenges. So, I called my father. So, as the child of a psychologist, there are lots of things written about us, kids of shrinks. And within a Jewish context, I would say that family itself, the relationships within the family, are often so fraught both with incredible connection and incredible, sometimes, toxicity. Right? The myth of the Jewish mother is no myth. As a Jewish mother myself, I can attest to it, which is to say, we care often very deeply, sometimes too deeply, about every move our children make. And our mothers before that did the same for us. Some with, alarming accuracy. I'm cold, you put on a sweater. And some, with a little too much attempting to understand or to know what their child is or wants or needs. So family is incredibly important. What stems from family is community. I'm fond of saying in my congregation, and I've been saying this for many years now, and I'm certainly not the only rabbi who's ever said this, but I just truly don't believe that you can be a Jew by yourself. For us, Jewish communal life, whether in a synagogue setting or whether going to a Jewish summer camp or whether you're in a youth movement, however it's manifest, one's Jewish identity is not solely their religious identity. It is everything who I am. I'll speak for myself. I know I am a Jew before anything else other than being a woman. It is that intrinsic to me. That's not to say it's the same for every Jew, but it has this capacity to envelop, both for good and for not so good, right, a person's self-awareness. But to be connected to community means that one is always, it is always accessible to them to not feel alone, even while we can always feel alone. The number one thing that I can say is something that my congregants report back as being the thing that got them to be more integrated into community is when they suffered a loss. And all these people came to mourn with them, to sit at their home, to comfort them. And suddenly they felt like, oh, I now understand what I'm supposed to do as a Jew. I'm supposed to be with other people. So these strengths of family, of community, of education, of understanding our place in the world are pretty much at the core of everything that I understand what it means to be a Jew. What I would say is that the challenges of all those same things in a post 9/11 interreligious, multicultural, universal world is that it's suffocating to some. And don't we all just want to be a good person, right? I'm not religious, I just want to be a good person, I hear. Well, that's a big challenge to those of us who dedicate our lives to creating religious or spiritual community, right? Because it is assimilationist, but not in the way of a generation or two ago that meant, oh, we're leaving, we want to be American, we don't want to be our religious or our national identity. It's, I just want to be like everybody else. And that's a real challenge within the Jewish community, I would think within any faith community. Because faith is seen as that which is your belief only. And for Jews, we think of our religious identity as much more all-encompassing than that. It's our culture, it's our religion, it's our family, it's what we eat, it's what we read, it's what's on our bookshelves at home, it's who we have at our table. But that can feel overwhelming to somebody who just wants to be a good person. I would say that the most important thing for a helping professional, in my own experience, I've had this in my love affair with therapists too, and no, my husband's not a therapist, but I like therapists also. I believe in therapy, if you will. But I feel like the most effective therapist that I have, and I've always, by the way, almost always chosen to see a non-Jewish therapist. That was my choice. Because as a rabbi, I felt like, I would sit down with the Jewish therapist and they'd be like, oh, what synagogue are you in? Oh, yeah, I'm not at that synagogue. No, I'm at this other synagogue. I can't stand my rabbi. And, well, projection happens in multi-dimensions, right? But asking about people's stories, asking about where they come from, and what is it that brings them to this moment, can reveal all kinds of things about their attachment to their religious or their Jewish identity. What they say and what they don't say. Right? Very often, mostly what they don't say. And I think that that's, just the most important thing. Who are you? It's the very first question asked in the Torah, asked in Genesis, is Ayeka. In the Hebrew, it means, where are you? That's what God says to Adam. Now, God's not saying to Adam, where are you? Because God doesn't know. It's not an issue of geography, right? God is saying to Adam, where are you? And we might extrapolate, who are you? Especially, God is saying, especially when I know, God thinks, when I know that you know that I know what you did that I told you not to do. The one thing I told you not to do, now I know that you've done it and you know that I know it, and where are you? Ayeka in this moment. That's the single most important question. And I would say, though, that the Torah, the Bible, doesn't leave us with only one question, because the next question is equally important, which is what God says to Cain. Ai achicha. Where is your brother? So we learn, anyone who reads the Bible learns this, but within the Jewish community, I feel that part of my calling as a religious leader is to be able to say, to ask and to answer, where am I? But also, where's my brother? Where's my sister? Where are they in this picture of the world that is so complicated? So in a therapeutic situation, those two questions are equally relevant, right? Where are you, this person who sits before you? Who are you? What have you come with in this moment? And where are the other people And who are the other people in this picture that complicate your life for good and for bad? And the last thing that I would say is that I'm done. Because I like I have one more thing. I thought she was going to give me a 1 minute. The last thing that I would say is that when human beings are created, or when the Torah, when the Bible imagines that human beings are created, we are told that we are created b'tselem Elohim, which means in the image of God. Every human being is created in the image of the divine. And that moment when you sit across from another person, whether you yourself understand this to be the Word of God, a word inspired by God, a word written by human beings, or whatever you understand in your own mind, don't let your theology get in the way of your practice of being able to see this person before you as created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. Now I'm really done.
So thank you for the invitation. I don't know if 10 minutes is going to be enough, but it's a big challenge, if it, for pastors. And so just quickly before we start, how many of you, when you hear the term church or religion, are you kind of hesitant? Just be honest. Exactly. Because I remember working with Lynn. Where's Lynn at? It was about 3-4 years ago, and we started collaborating in the community, and she said the first thing, because she knew I was a pastor, she said, "I'm not churchy." In other words, don't mess with me. Keep your distance. And I just had an honor and a privilege of the other day after a homicide. She came to the office, knocked on the door. You probably heard about it on the news already. A 14-year-old got killed over the weekend. She came and she reported about the incident, and she asked for prayer. So when you think about religion, don't think about it as religion. I'm trying to change the wording a little bit, or the meaning of it. Think about it as relationship. And so checking our own stuff at the door is going to help us. So, because there's a lot of countertransference that happens from our upbringing, our experiences. Isn't that true? Mm-hmm. And so just being aware of it and putting it out on the table and saying, okay, it's real. This is how I feel about church. This is how I feel about religion. I've had a bad experience. And then being able to say, okay, it's real and it's there and this is how I feel. But regardless of, I'm still willing to work and collaborate for the same purpose. And so think about church as a community of people. Because the church isn't the building, the church is the people. And so, and as far as the faith-based approach, I believe professionals have a whole lot more faith. Because you're having faith that your techniques, your strategies, and your knowledge is going to work. Doesn't that take faith? So in essence, we're a faith-based community right here. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Gold. Everyone say gold.
Gold.
The strengths in our community is that there is still gold in California. There's gold in San Diego. True story. My parents sold some property about 6 hours south of Guadalajara. Their plans was to build on this land. Didn't have the money, so they ended up selling it. People that bought the land, as they started, building, guess what they found? Pots of gold. True story. They almost passed out. We all passed out. They ended up building this big old a hall, a Salon Cristal, where they have weddings, banquets, and so if any of our members want to have a party, we get dibs on it. But that's what's out there. That's what's in our community. There's gold. But what's underneath? The gold is hidden. And so you as therapists or doctors or professionals, you're out there, you're digging. You're digging. You're digging. And there's even gold. You have gold. You. And discovering your gift, your purpose, and your passion. As Pastor was speaking, he found his gold. We found gold for ourselves. Your purpose, your passion, you found it. Now it's about helping others find their gold for their life. And, you know, the 10 Commandments, people view them as a do's and don't list, but it's not about that. For the 10 Commandments deal with our relationship with God. The other 6 deal with our relationship with one another. So what does that tell us? That all of life to the faith-based community is about relationships. It's not about a law. It's about the purpose of the law. To be able to have healthy relationships. And so, I'm all over the place here, but
Good job.
are you guys getting this?
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
We're having church up in here.
Keep talking.
And so I actually got the questions wrong because when they said, what are the strengths of your community? I thought mid-city. City Heights. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yeah?
I didn't know about like my community, our church community. So, I'm bad.
Okay, I asked them which one it was, and
Oh.
they said whatever you
Still okay.
want.
Oh, okay.
So, no, you got it right too.
I graduated from Garfield High, so. And so, what are the strengths of your community? And so there's gold out there, okay? We actually, this word strengths is very important. We did a strengths assessment with one of our youth at a table. 5 minutes, okay. We had a police officer, a gang member, and a mentor at the same table. The police officer's like this. And we asked him, what are the strengths of Steve, which is a documented gang member? And he couldn't come up with any. And so we kind of helped them out a little bit. Well, what are the strengths of being in the gang? They're team players. They love their community. They're courageous. They're bold. They're risk takers. Okay. And then he started to get the idea of it. Then we said, what are the strengths of the police officer? They love their community. They're courageous. They're bold. They're team players. We started realizing just focusing on our strengths that there's more in common than what they thought. Just one was expressing it in a different way than the other. And so, knowing as you're out there, knowing that you are a human, when you're out in the community, engaging the community, we're all human. We all have the same basic needs. Dealing with countertransference and all that stuff that our own mess, is identifying it, putting it to the side is going to help us really engage, because the community, when you're out there, they know, they can see if you're just out there, clocking in and clocking out, or if it's really your heart and your passion to help, to assist. And so knowing that you're going to connect your mind or your knowledge, which is good, which is a how-to, but connecting that with your heart. When you have that heart connection, then you have that bridge to be able to go into their world, see what's going on in their world, and then you're able to invite them back into your world. They can see what's going on in your world. Take a little bit of that, bring it back. And there's this back and forth, iron sharpens iron. And so how much more time? 2 minutes. 2 more minutes, okay. So, and so realizing, we've heard the term hurt people.
Yes.
Okay? So hurt people. And so those are the challenges that are out there in Mid-City. And one of the things for you to engage with this is the community, the faith-based community. They want to help. They want to partner. They want to collaborate. They just need someone to do what Lynn did. What was she doing? Knocking on doors. Knocking on doors and asking for help. And because of that, just about a year and a half ago, I had an ex-Mexican Mafia, guy from the Mexican Mafia, leader. He's now a reformed gang member, hugging and shaking hands with the police captain of Mid-City, and like a event of about 2,000-3,000 people. Now he's now the assistant chief. But just for that to happen, it sent ripple effects in the community. That change is possible.
Yeah.
And using people's strengths, even though by using their life experiences, coming out and helping others out.
Yeah.
And so just thank you guys. We appreciate the invitation. Thank you for your work.
glad to be here. How many people know that an African American pastor needs more than 10 minutes to Can I get an amen from somebody? I'm reminded of a story of David and Goliath. And David was this little guy, you know, and he wanted to go out and fight this big giant. And they told him, "What are you doing out here? You're a little guy. All you've got is this little slingshot with a few stones. What are you going to do with this big giant that has 6 fingers, 6 toes? His spear, the head of it was 25 pounds. His bed was approximately 9 feet 6 inches long." This guy was a big guy. No, big dude. And they asked him, "So why are you coming out here?" And because everybody was backing up off this giant. Everybody was scared of this opposition. And David responded, "Is there not a cause?" And if I can just hone in on that one word, cause. Because I think that when there's a cause that is bigger than we all are, that something innately happens inside of us that brings out the it factor, that brings out the stuff. And so now I've got 3, I guess, questions that they asked me if I would kind of elaborate. What are the strengths of the community? What are the challenges of the community? And how can helping professionals help the community? Well, first of all, is there a cause? Is there a cause? Is there something that we as a collective unit can do? Is there a cause? Because it has to be anything personal. It has to be something that we could all buy into. So, in my community, my immediate community, I would probably say the strengths of it is it's a melting pot. A lot of different cultures. We all want to build it. We all want to educate it. We all want to come together as a unit. But what's the one thing that keeps us in one unit and going one way? It's a collective cause. It's a cause. What's the cause? You know, I kind of crack up at people when they start. I think there was somebody over the weekend that got killed. There was a lady in El Cajon City because she was Muslim. And they killed her and told her to go back to her country because she was a terrorist. Now that's when it became personal. Very bad. But if we could come together, I might not agree with all your religious philosophies or theology. But the question is can we come together in one purpose? 12 square feet is 12 square feet. If a man is hungry, should we first get the credentials of his religious background? Or should we give him, in the hood we call it bologna sandwich. You know, I used to cook those bologna sandwiches, put it on the skillet, and it would curl up on one side. You guys know about that. When it comes to the cause is feeding the man. We come together, we put aside those religious, spiritual, intellectual, positional, because you know we hide behind the power blue suit. But the question is what's the cause? Can we come together on a cause? The number 2 thing is, what are the challenges of the community? Well, the challenge is, in our community, it's knowing how to speak Spanish. Quien tengo un día? Dios te bendiga. Now, it sounds like I can really speak Spanish, doesn't it? But I have a problem with it. I think that some of the challenges, if we could have possibly Hispanics to be able to teach others in the community how to speak the language, pro bono, free, it would be great. That we can come together with this cause, is what it's all about. Challenges also when it comes to different religions. You know, you believe in Mother Mary. She's a mediatrix. You're Muslim. You guys still sacrifice, you know, animals. You believe in this Jesus. How can he be God? You're Jewish. You know, we're the only chosen people. We can go on with some of the idioms that happens in religion. And sometimes you get into this big heated debate, this heated argument, and it actually goes nowhere. And we lose sight of the cause. It's really about the cause, the greater good, something that's larger than ourselves, as David and Goliath. And then finally, how can the helping professionals, that means you, how can you help? You know what I'd be delighted to have? I'd be delighted to have you come to New Way Christian Ministries and join the church. Now, what for the purpose of what? Being able to speak to some of these people, some of the young people. Being able to speak into their lives the way that you speak into their lives. To be able to assist them. I believe that the twain can meet. Now, in my denomination, we lay hands on the sick. We lay hands on them. But there have been times when I've laid hands on somebody that might have had a mental issue. And when I got through laying hands on them, guess what? They didn't get better. All of my praying, it didn't work. So I believe that what you do and what I do, the twain should meet. You speak to them the way that you speak to them, and I'll be able to trail that with some spirituality. Some people take medicine. I don't stop them from taking medicine. Take your medicine, but come to counseling with your pastor. I think that we could actually change and turn a whole lot. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your time. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, I would like to greet you all with the greeting of peace, the greeting of Islam. We as Muslims, when we greet people, we say Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be with you or peace be upon you. Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to be with you and to share with you some of the thoughts regarding the Muslim community in general and in San Diego County in particular. I don't know if you know that the estimated number of the Muslim population in San Diego County is about 100,000 Muslims, and it's a very, very diverse community. There is a misconception that a lot of people think that it's true, which says that every Muslim is an Arab and every Arab is a Muslim. Do you think that this is true? No. Actually, almost 1.5 billion Muslims in the world, more than 80% of them are not Arabs. They don't speak Arabic. Indonesia, for example, the largest Muslim country, they don't speak Arabic. So Arabs are only about 18% of the worldwide Muslim community. So the Muslim community here in San Diego reflects the diversity that we have worldwide. And there is about 21 mosques, houses of worship for Muslims in the county. The largest one where I serve, the Islamic Center of San Diego, located very close to here in Claremont area on Balboa Avenue and 805. An imam for our community members is not only a religious leader. He's a counselor, he's a therapist, he's sometimes a physician. So when somebody is sick, instead of going to the physician, they come to the imam. And they ask the imam to recite some verses of the Quran in the water. And they believe that when they drink this water, everything is okay. So an imam basically is a multitask person. And I'm saying this because within our community, especially most of them are immigrants. Most of them are first generation immigrants who came from all over the world. Seeking treatment through a therapist or psychologist or psychiatric, it's still a taboo. Not every single Muslim is open to do this. So they think that before seeking treatment from a professional, they think that the imam might do it. You know, he's the man of God. So maybe in a way that he can treat my anxiety or stress or whatever I'm going through. So that's why we do urge our community members. Yes, the faith can play a big role in the life of a Muslim, of a person. But also we do urge them to seek professional treatment. Let me just give you in a few seconds a small and very brief background of my faith, as it's maybe the most misunderstood faith on earth nowadays, especially in the West. Islam is a comprehensive way of life that covers all aspects of life. So as a Muslim, the belief system should be taken from the teachings of Islam. The rituals and the worship system. Even in our personal, family, social life, there are guidelines that we have to follow. Even in our businesses, financial transactions, even when we do business, when we take loans, when we buy homes and cars and all that stuff, there are very strict rules and regulations that we have to follow, that we have to observe. And Muslims are people who strive, to submit themselves to the will of God, to the will of Allah. And by the way, Allah is not a different God that is only the God of Muslims. Allah is just the Arabic version of the word God. So it's like Dieu in French, or Dios in Spanish, or Khuda in Persian. So in Arabic, we call upon God by saying Allah. The same thing Arab Christians in the Middle East, when they worship, they don't say God, they say Allah. So Muslims, believe that they have to have their lives conducted according to the teachings of Islam. And when I say the teachings of Islam, I mean the main two major sources of the teachings of Islam: the Quran, the Word of God revealed to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the Hadith, which is the collection of the sayings and actions of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Islam urges Muslims to live as a community. So everywhere in the teachings of Islam, we find this communal community aspect. The first question is the strength, within my community. So to know from where to enter, whenever you receive a Muslim patient or you deal with him or her. The first aspect of strength is the unity of faith. So all Muslims believe, no matter to which school of thought they belong to, they share the same principles of the belief, and they almost worship the same way. The 5 daily prayers, you can find them everywhere, in the Sunni community as well as in the Shia community, in progressive liberal Muslims as well as conservative Muslims. So we do have this aspect of unity of faith. Yes, there are some different schools of thought that differ in some minor issues or branches of Islam. The second aspect of strength is diversity. Yes, we are one faith as Muslims, but Muslims belong to a lot of ethnicities and cultures. So often whenever I give a training to social workers and nurses and physicians and so on, they ask me this question: Why, when we dealt with this Muslim woman who came from Pakistan, it was not the same when we dealt with this Muslim woman who came from Somalia, for example. So I have to go and with them and to tell them how different cultures exist within the same faith community. Number three, the third aspect of strength is the sense of open-mindedness and considering the human family. If you go through the teachings of Islam, it's amazing, how many verses in the Quran and sayings of the Prophet. In the verse, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, which means, and we have honored the children of Adam, which include every single human being. يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَى. O people, we have created you from a pair of a male and a female, and we have made you into tribes and nations. So why? What's the purpose of this diversity in religion and ethnicity and languages and color of skin? And so you may know one another. And knowing one another here is to come together as human beings, working for the greater good. And many other, like the saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, كُلُّكُم مِّنْ آدَمَ وَآدَمْ مِّن تُرَابٍ. You are all from Adam, your father. And Adam is from clay, from dust. So you belong all to the same source. The challenges, number one, diversity. It's an opportunity, it's a strength, but in the same time, if we mess with it, if we don't know how to use it, then it becomes a big challenge in terms of faith versus culture. The second challenge is the integration, the positive integration, versus the other two extremes, either assimilation or isolation. And both of these two extremes are rejected in our community. We have only one option, which is the positive integration. For a family who came from far away, from a refugee camp in Uganda or Kenya, straight to San Diego for the first time, integration for them is not an option. The first option for them is what? Isolation. They have to keep their faith and their culture and their values, and so they have to, they are not allowed in their belief to, build any relationship with any strangers, until they go through the system and they understand that, this is not an option, the only option we have, which is the positive integration. The third challenge, and I will close with it, Islamophobia. This wave, that we have witnessing nowadays, Islamophobia, stereotypes, misconceptions about Islam, and Muslims portraying Islam as a religion of violence and Muslims as barbaric people. Actually, please tell me, every time whenever you hear the word Islam in the media, or a Muslim in the media, it's either somebody who blew up himself or herself somewhere in the Middle East, or somebody killed, somewhere in the West, like, the lady in Alcohol a few days ago. So this is, for the Westerners, our fellow men and women in the West, whenever they hear the word Islam or Muslims, it's associated with a tragedy, with an act of terror, act of violence. So it kind of contributed to have this image, this picture about Islam as a religion that can never be integrated in the West. Islam and Muslims are a threat to the Western lifestyle. Islam and Muslims can never be part of the American social fabric. So all these misconceptions and stereotypes that we are dealing with is the biggest challenge for my community at this time. Thank you so much, and maybe we can talk more about this.
Thank you. Let me just by saying, educating a lot of you people. The Kumeyaay has been in this area of San Diego for tens of thousands of years. And so our territory ran from 60 miles past the border, 60 miles from the border up, and then all the way to the sand dunes of what we could call El Centro. And within our communities, we have 12 bands that are here within the San Diego County that are Kumeyaay. It's what I am, that's what we call ourselves. Like she said, my name is Paul Cuero. Cuero is a Spanish name. Of course, when the Spanish came here, they couldn't pronounce our clans, lack of a better word. Like, really, it's Cuas, and Cuas means skin, and that's where they get Cuero, because Cuero's like hide. And so therefore that's where Cuero came from, but really my clan name is Cuel, which means skin. And today I think that one of the positive strengths within my community, I think, is that we have no homeless. And that's because we're all related with each other and we take care of each other. And I think that's one of our strengths that we have so far, that we're able to keep right now. I think that, like a lot of the people spoke today, it's spirituality is the basis of everything, of how we live and how we think. You know, the other thing is that, you know, I have a girlfriend that happens to is going to school here, trying to get her PhD in psychology, of course. And we argue a lot because a lot of the times her way of thinking, the way that we taught to her is a Western thinking. And so therefore we clash because I come from a traditional thinking. And so we'll sit there and we'll clash. Well, this is how I was learning. I said, well, that's not how it's going to be for our people. She's also Native. She's a Navajo. So we sit there and we think it out. How is this going to work with our own people? We have, within our consortium, our clinic, which about 6 tribes belong to that pulled their money together to create this clinic, we have therapists that come there. That actually, a couple of them came from this school. And I would sit down and talk with them. And the one thing that I think that, the challenge was that our people were used to, when they were sick or mentally as well, would go see a medicine man, what we call kwasiai, or kwasiai. And they would go there and they would tell them, this is what you need to do. Well, within therapy, it's a little bit different. You sit down and you say, okay, let's sit and talk. And therefore, you'll see it yourself. Well, our people get like, I sat with this person and I'm not getting nowhere. And then they stop because they feel like, I'm not getting nowhere with it. All they're doing is just sitting me talking, and I'm not getting no help. Well, they need to understand, what is therapy? What is the basis of it? How does it work? You know, and the other thing, just like they said, within our people, grant you, we have a reason not to trust. Look what's happened to us. But through all that's what happened to us, when they sit down to talk to them, they're like, I don't think I could trust this person because of the tragedies that happened in the past. But our people are the type that if you sit down with them for a while and they get to know you, then they'll just open up like a book. They'll just tell you everything. But it's about building that trust with the therapist first. And I think, and you know, when I sat down with some of those therapists, I said, you need to come to our community events. You need to come to the community. Because I said, you know, a long time ago when we did have the Kwasiai, he didn't say, well, I can't be here because they're going to see me and they're going to think. No, he was part of the community. And once you become part of that community, then that trust starts to happen. They start to see, well, okay, well, they're not such a bad person now. And then again, and once they start building, our people are like this. You lie to us one time, you're always going to be considered that liar. You can't trust them. They lie. They're no good. That's how our people are. When they see, if you lie to them, that's all they're going to see you as. It's this liar. And so again, but you could build that trust again, because that's the way our people have always been. This year it'll be 470 years since the first time the Spanish ship came to our harbor. 1542. And trying to get this community, not just within San Diego County, to recognize who we are as the Native people here. I think that those are the kind of things, when I got invited to come to this and talk about this, I said, oh, yeah, sure, I'll come. But I'm not the person that speaks for all of our people. I don't. But I do know some of these things that how our people think in certain instances. Like I said, because I've seen this whole happen so many times after the therapy, our people like, this, I don't know why I'm going to come to this. And then, like I said, and they just quit. They don't come back. And so you have to, if you are coming to work in our communities, learn a little bit of something about who we are. Because if you do that, then you'll have this, with anything, with therapy, of course, it's always start out with conversation, but don't attack the problem so quickly. Let's engage in a matter of how do we get to know each other first. And I think then you'll be able to move forward and help them. Like I said, in our communities, we don't have the medicine men no more. They were killed off. And, we can, talk about those things. And we still have these big struggles because within our spirituality, it's starting to fall. And, one of the things that, if you do know that the Dalai Lama is coming here, he'd asked to meet with the native people here. And we're trying to be able to meet with him. Because we want to see, again, a man that carries his spirituality, maybe to start to open our eyes again. Because like I said, the spirituality is the basis of wellness, complete wellness. But we've had, for a long time, of that taken away from us, or told us we couldn't practice it, to where a lot of it has been forgotten. So therefore, we're looking towards now you, the therapist, to come in and help them with these problems that they need to be helped with. But again, learn something about our people, and then come in, and I think that you'll be able to get them to open up and start that healing. Because I think there's a big healing. And again, too, remember, there's always, too, this Western thinking is a little bit different than ours. And that's why, like I said, when I sat down with a therapist, I would sit down and tell them, this is how sometimes how we think, and this is how you got to address these things within our community. The difference here within who I am and these gentlemen and lady here is our community is isolated. We're on a reservation and we stay there. And so I'm talking about the very people that are there. And so, and like at my own reservation, I know everybody there because it's part of my community. But we see it is crumbling. And there, like again, to keep repeating this is where you're going to come in. But again, you have to learn a little bit of who we are, and try to think outside of that box when it comes to the Western thinking. Because remember, we're not Western people. We have a different way of thinking on different things. But when we talk about religion, we all believe the same, and we all have that same belief of one Creator. We call him Maiha. It's the same as all these people here. Even within the Bible, the Creator says, I have many houses. So that meant that, yes, He has created us all a little bit different from us. Just like within the Christian belief, we believe we're made from mud. He took mud and He fashioned us. He made man first, He made woman. Then He gave us colors. He says women are red, men are black. And the reason for that is because women carry on the blood. They're the ones that are going to carry us on. Men, we're black because we cannot have kids. But what we can do is offer you protection and all these different other things. These are roles that the Creator had given us. I always tell our young people, that means that we don't beat our wives. We don't do these kind of things because they are sacred. They are they're the ones that are carrying who we are on. These are the kind of messages that, that within our creation story, within our lack of better word, our spirituality tells us these things. Today, I come with my spirituality. I come with what little wisdom that I have so far. And I hope I come with humility within my words. Because it's important. And that we're all going to live here for hopefully more thousands and thousands more years. But how do we get along and how do we work together? Because we all have the same goals of living a good life, bringing our children up in a good way, and having respect for one another. I think that's the one thing that we need to share. Even though, like I said, we've been through a lot of tragedies, but we've always been that try to give. Like I said, when that first ship came here, the first thing that our people did was feed them and sing and dance for them. That's the first thing that we've done. Of course, they didn't leave on a good note. We were shooting arrows at them at the end of it. But we tried to welcome them who they were, because that's how our people have always been, is to welcome. And the first thing that we always do, we always sit down and eat. You see how big I am. But that's one of our cultures, is that we've always sat down and ate together. But hopefully we could discuss more at the next panels. But thank you.
We're going to invite you all out to the patio to engage our panelists. There are tables out there. We each will have a panelist and a leader, and we've got 2 questions that we're going to try to focus on. How can we take what we have just learned, this fantastic information, and incorporate it into our professional practices? And how can we take this knowledge and incorporate it into our teachings, our curriculum, guidance to clients and colleagues? Okay, so please.
Okay. All right, everyone. Let's please have everyone speakers from the groups come up. Please, please, please. Every group should have had a speaker or a note taker. Let's have them come up. And then we're going to have Dr. Henderson provide our closing remarks after this. And Dr. Newman wish us well as we head to our homes. But what we don't want to have happen is that this just be a wonderful afternoon and then that be it. This is life-changing stuff that we're engaged here. A good colleague of mine, Ken Blanchard, told me as I was preparing for this week, he said, put 2 sticky pads on everything. Label one sticky pad life-changing stuff. And label the other sticky pad temporary stuff. This is life-changing. Knowing who we are. Knowing who others are. Understanding that, respecting that. Nurturing that. So we don't want to end today with just the end of the colloquium. We want this to be the first step of many for this fine institution to really practice what we teach. Yeah? So,
well, I get to
Andrew.
start. All right. Our group said think outside the box, so I came to this side. No, I'm just kidding. Well, we said a lot, and I tried to capture it. It was really a wonderful conversation. We shared that we should have the courage to be vulnerable and transparent, that there is healing in our spiritual paths, that we should have the strength to talk about our differences, that there's a lot of value in discovering the value within us, that we need to talk to each other more, and that there's collaboration is really rich and powerful. A lot of the talk towards the middle of the conversation was around, well, where does the rubber meet the road? What's the application? So there was some really great conversations around grounded theory and an act and things of that nature. But we also shared that we need to embrace our cause, that we need to be open and listen, that there's a lot of commonality that we have and we need to seek it. And I think all of this was very deeply rooted in our desire to help each other. And that was something special.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I'm going to go next and we'll just kind of go down the line. There was so much that we talked about, and mind you, all of this will be typed up and sent out to everyone who signed in. And we'll make sure that our powers that be join this process as well by educating them on what's happened. One of the things that they said was that we need to be good listeners. We need to really hear people, because that's the foundation of trust. To access and trust our inner voice. We can't be reactive to who people are or what they believe. We need to begin to understand why. Some of the dialogue was about, people hold beliefs because they've been told to believe that. We need to find that out and better understand. There is no way, one way to do this. There's no perfection. There's no right or wrong. It's a multitude. And our stories, whether we're faculty, program directors, students, what have you, our stories matter to the people that we're caring for. We need to be authentic. It needs to be both and. That we need to expand our Western minds and really begin to understand the multicultural, intercultural, interfaith components that make up our communities. When it starts coming to whether there's rubber meet the road and some concrete things to do, one of the things that really came out was when we're teaching others, we've got curriculum review boards, inviting community members, all of you on the curriculum review boards, so that this learning, this process continues. So we want to invite you to the table and stay here. And believe me, I'll call and harass you. And if you don't know about that, I'll just ask someone. No blaming, no shaming, and no attacking others or yourself. And I'll hand it off to my colleagues.
Thank you so much. So one thing that came out of our conversation with the group is education. Obviously, this has been repeated here many times. Educating ourselves about different religions and the communities. And in my group, obviously, we discussed about Islam and the Muslim community. So understanding what Islam is and the Muslim community. And that education should not just come from secondary sources, reading books or listening to news or anything like that, but from direct contact with the community, really having that first-hand experience. Also, we should understand that we are all part of this social fabric, all different religious communities. So we share the same goals. We all want to have a better life for ourselves and for our children. So understanding this is also important. With respect to professional practice, how do we engage the Muslim community as non-Muslim practitioners? And one suggestion Imam Taha had is engage the community and the religious leader if necessary. If that is going to be part of the healing process, don't hesitate to make that as part of your treatment, if you will. And there was one interesting question that I also want to share with you. One student asked, how do I deal with a veteran who just returned from Afghanistan or Iraq and has that negative view of Muslims in general and cannot differentiate between, let's say, a radical extremist and a Muslim who lives in this country. So it is, again, important to educate ourselves about not only Islam and the Muslim community, but also understand the context within which these soldiers, veterans were put into those lands and had to go there. What was the purpose? And understanding the general, military and political context would also help. And acknowledging the experience, the reality of it, and hopefully gaining trust and acceptance over time. So these are what came out of our group, and thanks so much for
I just wanted to thank everybody, and it's a fantastic collaboration. I think it's really awesome. It takes a lot of courage to accept interfaith communication, and I think it's a really big part of what we do. But what drew us here, I think, was a big part of it, is that when we hear religion, it's kind of almost what we hear when we hear therapy. So I think that big boundary that we feel that Pastor Sandoval mentioned when he was speaking was that it's kind of the same thing. We have these preconceptions of religion and what is therapy, and we need to diffuse that. We need to not attack with an attack. We need to understand why people have these preconceptions and learn what it's like for them and what their experience is. And what we learned about our new approach is that to take into consideration the diversity of many cultures, whether it's within a religion, whether it's within a division of the city, whether it's a ethnic or a racial diversity issue, and to also the verbal, I think the wording we use, I think we talked about sometimes using the word client may not feel as comfortable for your patient or client. I mean, it's kind of like a paradox, but kind of like giving this relationship more than a law or a hierarchical relationship, and also just to work as a community and to work with not only community leaders but also spiritual leaders and that it's all about a collaboration, that we're all in this for a mutual goal, and to know about these volunteer opportunities. And we had a member of the group that worked with San Diego Police Department, and I think it's just important to know context in different faiths, different multicultural communities, both spiritual, community, and professional.
Okay. Alrighty, so I was in Paul's group, and one of the biggest things that we discuss is that we need to be able to get to know the people that we're working with. We can't just approach them and say, hey, tell me your problems, or hey, let's get into this, and this technique. When we're working with diverse groups, we need to talk to them about the technique. What is it going to involve? What should they expect from us? We also talked a lot about being able to contact this community. So we want to be getting involved in the community. For example, with Paul, he was saying that there's different gatherings that we can go to be able to just to get to know these people and not create that separation. Also, we talked about long-term commitments as something that's really significant, especially to his particular group of people. Let me start over. Basically, we just want to make sure that we're not going in there for just our job. It needs to be a passion. We need to go in there and say that we're here because we care. And we're here because we want to get to know you, and we want to know who you are as a person and the different things that you like to do during your day. It's really hard if we go in and then we leave 3 months later. So I think I'm just going to let Sheila. I'm going to let Sheila wrap it up from here. Good job.
Well, our group did not follow the questions. And I think the reason for that is we were all taken so much by Rabbi Yidberg and just her presence, and also I think just the confusion around the Jewish persecution was just hard, and so we ended up going way back, all the way to the beginning of time as we knew it, to try and figure out what happened. And it doesn't make any more sense to me now than it did then before, but at least I can start to understand how people began to separate around belief systems. And so I want to also give a chance to, I signaled over to Phoenix to see, Phoenix, if you want to give some impressions from the students' point of view of what happened at our table.
Okay. Well, kind of saying what Andrew was saying, I think that from my perspective, there's always been some sort of historical trauma for every religion, every people, and it just made me ask the question, why are we continuously, if we, at some level, whether religious leaders say it or not, at least their followers believe that at some point they have a higher understanding or maybe the answer that they're looking for, and sometimes people can gather underneath that and kind of shy away from each other, and my thinking is we isolate from that, and what I wanted to understand is how can we actually have access to people in order to, I think to me that's the most critical. I think that's paramount, because if we don't have access to it, it's great to come out to forums like this, but for me specifically, the individual, how do I get into the Jewish community? Like how do I, and not in a formal sense, how do I walk through the streets, so to speak, and just see and engage with people? Are people going to be open to me doing something like that? And I think that if we can, sometimes religious leaders are a little bit slower than the people that they profess to or preach to, so to speak, to change as well as we do because we're more on the ground, and they have to have more of a purview to that. And so my thinking is maybe if we start our level, so to speak, engagement, going out, hanging out, not just in the big forms, but hanging out. Maybe we can actually, change things from the bottom up versus the top down, because I think a lot of the historical trauma could have come from the top versus the bottom. But that's just one man's perspective.
I just want to say one thing. I think that one of the greatest teaching points from our discussion from Rabbi Yael was, and as a psychologist, as a clinician, as a therapist, is when you're working with anybody from any background, understanding the ideology of the racism, the ideology of the persecution, the ideology of why things have happened can only make you understand, be more empathetic, right? Can only make you really understand who you're working with. And I think that, as I'm a Jewish woman that has been Jewish my entire life, and from the 30 minutes of discussion, I learned more about my people than I had learned in, 15 years of Hebrew school. Don't tell my mom. But the point is that to understand where things start makes you understand who that person is. And I think that was really the real take home and the real teaching point. And then taking it one step further, like Phoenix was saying, is then how do we access these people? Are Jews available? How do I access them? How do I work with them? So it was very, very meaningful. Thank you.
Okay, we're wrapping up now, so closing remarks. I had some great closing remarks, and they're on my computer. And I had that one down. I practiced over and over. So these are spontaneous closing remarks, and probably better.
Sheila, can I just interject? Because
please.
I think what our students are asking of us is that we be real.
Okay.
That we're not perfect, and we don't have to know all the answers, and that we have to show that to them, that it's okay to not be perfect.
Great. Well, that works for me. Great. Okay. Well, my closing remarks are really about what happens when we bring faith leaders together, and what happens when we all come together, really in a spirit of learning. And I think that something has happened here today, that we're all feeling, I haven't been in a group of people for a long time. When I looked out in the audience, no one was on their phone. I haven't had that experience. Even when I teach, people are on their phone. And I noticed that everybody was very, very engaged today. And so something's happening. And, our Provost Newman has really inspired me around what collaboration means. And he talks about bringing people to the table and then keeping people at the table. Right? And I think a lot about that. So what does that mean? Keeping the dialogue going. Even when the dialogue gets painful, right? Stirs us up, starts to get really uncomfortable. You want to run out of the room. You don't want to be there anymore. But to the extent that we can keep each other at the table and keep talking to get to that point where really we can understand. And that's something that we can do here at Alliant. That this has inspired me that it's really possible. And if we don't do that, I really believe that we miss out. We miss out on knowing what could happen in unity, but also we miss out because we miss out knowing someone who's different than us. And what we change when we know someone who's different than us. And really understand them. So what I want to inspire all of you is, in some way we've all been open today in this deep engagement we've had. And so now what do you do when you walk out the door? And I just want to challenge you to do, and this is not an original thought, I'll own that. This is inspired by Thomas Parham, who's a really inspiring African-American leader in Irvine. He says, just do one thing different. Just do one thing different tomorrow. You don't have to change and become supremely culturally competent tomorrow. Start where you are, do one thing different. Then you will change, right? Just from that one action. And then the next day, practice that. Practice that until it's part of you. Then, maybe a month later, 2 months later, do something else. Make it small, make it tangible, make it something you can handle, you know? Then practice and then do something different. So I just challenge all of you tomorrow to do one thing different. You know what that needs to be for you. Or you'll decide tomorrow, you'll figure it out tomorrow, but just one thing different. And I'll be there doing my thing different.
That's great.
Thank you. And so.
One of the things you get to do a lot of when you're a high-ranking university official is openings and closings. Because everybody needs closure. But I'm going to do the anti-close here, because I think closure's overrated. And I'm going to tell you why I think that's relevant here. I was particularly reminded of some of my own personal experience by the rabbi's comments when she was talking about how going in to see a therapist, if you're a Jewish person, looking for a Jewish therapist who would be able to best understand you. Well, I'm a good Jewish boy. Well, okay, Jewish boy, not so good. And part of my training was in Oklahoma. I was at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. And as a good Jewish boy in Oklahoma City, I got a lot of questions of people coming in for counseling. Are you a good Christian counselor? That was a very frequent question that was asked of me. And of course, through the course of my year on internship, I learned a more sophisticated way to deal with that. In the beginning, I, of course, did what I thought was the textbook response. Somehow it's important for you to know whether I'm a good Christian counselor. I got that one out of the way, and eventually what I discovered was I just needed to listen to what it was they meant by a good Christian counselor. To begin to listen to their experience, which is that's what it was all about. It was bringing their experience and looking for somebody who was going to understand their experience. And while I think there are many instances in which you may want to refer somebody to another therapist who actually has more similar characteristics in some way that are so important to that person that that's really where the therapeutic work is going to have to be. But that's not always going to happen. More of the times, you're going to have to work your way through their experience in order to be able to understand it enough to have some ability to help them. And the reason that this is the anti-close is because you've got to fight the pressure to always have closure. You have to be comfortable with that uncertainty of not knowing what you can do here, not knowing enough about this person, not knowing whether you can connect or not. It takes time, it takes process, it takes respect, it takes sensitivity, all the things you've all been talking about. So if there's one thing you do and you remember when you leave here, just remember, closure's overrated, and when you're working in your professional activity, you really need to listen, you need to work. And today's program didn't teach you anything about religious diversity. It taught you how to learn about religious diversity, or at least I hope that's what it taught. I want to thank Sheila. I want to thank Dr. Griffin for all the work she did, which was just so tremendous. It choked me up. It overwhelmed me. She really put a great program together. I want to thank the panelists for their great discussions here on the panel and their work with the integrated learning tables, and the facilitators at the integrated learning tables as well. So let's give them all a big hand and give yourself a big hand.
Thank Thank you all very much. Safe home, be good to yourselves, be good to one another. We ask our guest speakers just to hang out with us for 1 minute more because we have some small tokens of appreciation for all of you. Be well. We'll see you soon on spring break. Remember, for those that are my students, don't stop reading. Godspeed.